Well, I've shown you how to do hand-tinted framing, and we've done the pictures and all sorts of different mediums. What I haven't actually ever done is shown you how to make your own mounts up, or mats as they say in America. So while I've got the mount cutter out, and I'm going to do a couple of mounts now, some A3 mounts with some watercolours, I'll show you the techniques that we use for using one of these larger mount cutters to do some ordinary double mounts like these. So we've got a dark inner and a light outer, a dark inner, a light outer, which is the usual. And we'll do a series of three sorts in this case. It's going to be a 4-inch mount on the ones we're doing, these larger A3s, with a 1/4 inch inner. So I'll explain how all of that works and how the machine works. For those of you that, like me, need to save a few bob and do your own mounting, I only keep to 4 basic colours, one darker one and one lighter one. It's nice to be able to afford to have the stock of lots of different colours, but I don't find I need it. Just those 2 colours I showed you seem to do everything that I need to work with in my paintings. First of all, let me explain the mount cutter itself. We've got a guard here that lifts up to place the card underneath and hold it down, whilst this movable block here has 2 blades on it. One, a vertical one, just to cut the card to size. It's going to be measured to this block here that moves up and down, and when I place that to the distance that I want here, it will cut the card to whatever measurement it said there. So it's 22 inches, I set 22 inches there, and this blade here will cut it. I have to have a piece of a spare card laid underneath this guard so that the blade cuts through my primary card, my main mount, and into this, or it'll tear through at the bottom edge. So it's important to have a piece of waste card underneath there, and that, as I say, will cut my card to the size initially. So what I do is I measure the painting I want, the size that I want to actually mount it to the window, and then add 8 inches for my 4-inch mount. So if it's 20 inches, then I'll cut 28 inches. And if it's 10 inches across, then it'll be 18 inches the other way. That gives my basic piece. And if we want a double mount, then I'm cutting 2 pieces of card, as you'll see. This movable area also is the cutter for the bevel, for our actual window into the card. And that's this one here, which cuts in at an angle. I'll show you in a moment. And we have to set 3 areas. This one for the top of the mount, this one for the bottom edge of the mount, and we have to set this one here also to get the outer edge of the mount. So the 3 pieces to set, all at the same measurements. Let's have a look at the cutting mechanism a little bit more closely. Here you see the cutter for the size of the mount, the outside cutter of the mount, and it's a 90-degree cutter. This one is 45 degrees, and as you can see it will cut into the card here at 45 degrees for the window. So when we do that, we have to make sure that the card is upside down for that one. You'll see why later. This can be adjusted. The thickness of the amount of blade coming out can be adjusted by these setters. And we simply undo these Allen keys here to remove the blades and replace the blades. Obviously, it's vital that we have sharp blades at all times. They're double-sided blades, so we can turn them around and reuse each end. Okay, let's make a start. The actual tools we're going to need, other than the mount cutter, are a tape measure, a pencil and a craft knife. Now we want to cut the pieces to size first, and in this case the pieces are going to be 29 inches by 22. So out of a large sheet of card like this, and this is a colour mount, we should get 2 mounts, 1, 2. And we'll cut first the width across, so we're going to get 29 out of this way, no trouble at all, 29 will be about there, and we'll get 2 22s this way. So that's trying to keep it as simple as I can for you, and we set this one here to the 22. So as it says here, read here, we measure that to the 22 inches, exactly, tighten that up, and that's where the board's going to come to get our 22s. Now taking the board lengthways, lift up the guard, hold the card underneath it, right the way through until we can line it up here with the stop. Make sure that it's tight up against the guard here, that's the important thing. Tight against this edge here, and it goes right up against our measuring stop here. Make sure this is moved out of the way, and this is nice and tight and flush. Bring bring the the actual cutting block up here, and with the vertical one, and making sure there's a piece of card underneath for it to cut through onto, we simply pull that down and along, and voila, it's cut as simple as that. And that's our 22-inch piece ready. Take that away. Again, bring in the next piece, check which is the cleanest edge, make sure you've no mess on it anywhere, and line that up again by lifting the mount, make sure the piece of scrap card is underneath so you can cut onto that, drag that piece through, and we will cut to that edge again. Lift up the vertical mount all the way down. And we're going to do this with all of our pieces of card, and there's a nice spare piece to go under there later. So that's the width of our mount. We're going to do that with all of the pieces of card, all the same size for this first of all. If the piece of waste card you're using gets shot, if it gets cut to pieces, we'll obviously take it out and replace it with a new piece. Right, well there's our 12 pieces of card cut to the 22-inch across. Now we've got to cut the 29-inch lengths. Simple enough, so we take this from the 22 and now slide it down to the 29. Our pieces of card will now fit under the guard again. Put a new piece of card under there again, remember. Keep cutting onto nice fresh card here. Main piece, which is 22 inches wide, now slots down to there, into that piece, absolutely level on here. Make sure that everything is always level, otherwise you're going to get a mount that's not true, not square, and problems later. And that's it, that's 29 inches long. Bring that up, cut through, and if all of those are now done the same, that's going to be our standard mount. Now just to give you an example of why we use this piece of waste card underneath, I've moved it to one side and I'm just going to cut this one without that to show the sort of rough edge you get if you don't use it. As you can see here, we've got all these little bits of fluffy edge along the mount, so you do need that piece of waste card underneath to get a nice neat cut. And here's a piece of card that's now being cut with the waste card underneath, and you see an absolutely sharp, clean edge. Now you see they've actually divided up my card into the two tones here, darks and lights. And the lights are going to be the upper ones, and the darks the under ones with the thin edge, a 1/4 inch edge. So the under ones are going to be a 4 inch, and the outer ones are going to be 3 3/4, leaving a 1/4 inch border of these showing. So I'm going to set, it doesn't matter which way around you go at the moment, I'm going to set my mount cutter up to do the 4 inch first of all, which would be the inner ones, the dark ones. When we cut those we must make sure that they're face down, so let's see how to set up the machine for that. Back onto the guides that we need to set up. There's this one here, which is the edge of the mount, the outer edge of the mount. That needs to be set at 4 inches here. And then we go to this stop here that we moved back when we were cutting. That's set to 4 inches to stop the cutter from going any further than 4 inches. So we set that now up to there where it says read here, and I'm going to set it in fact just a fraction over the 4 inches to give a slight overcut so we don't have the corners catching, which is why we've got the craft knife in case it does. And finally set this one at 4 inches here, so that stop goes over the card, as we shall see in a moment. Right then, so it's the larger 4 inch undermount, the one that's going to be the actual inner window that we're going to cut first. And make sure that you have your card upside down, because the bevel has to be that way, and this bevel is cutting in that direction. Doesn't matter which corner you start on, fresh card underneath, slide that in with the card, making sure the card stays underneath it until it's right into the corners like that, level with the edges, level in the corner, absolutely square. Then slide the cutting block up to here, where that little piece goes there, it fits against there, hold this down, push in your 45-degree cutter and slide that down until it reaches your stop there. Out the card, bring it down to the next angle, push it in. This is all of our dark ones at 4 inches then. Make sure that it's absolutely level. And the cutter, same thing again, push that down, slide it across, and that should finish with a perfect cut like that. So all the way around. sure it's level. And the last cut, and hopefully now that piece will pop out of the middle, nice and easily. That gives us our perfect window mount. What we have to do is carry on, do all the rest of the dark mounts, and then we go across to our top lighter ones. Press down, slide along, it's as quick as this, up, bring it round, make sure the card is underneath, get it level, absolutely level, slide it up, lock on there. Now this is a straightforward window mount with a double mat. We can make more complicated ones. It'll take far more time, don't use any more card, but it takes a lot more working out. I'll show you in just a moment. There we go, release the blade out of the way, piece of card away, perfect cut. So I'll now continue and do all of the dark ones, and then I'll show you the light ones. Make sure it's level and right up to the edges. Level all sides with the card underneath it. There, absolutely square. Bring that up, stop there, press in the blade, slide it down, lift out the blade. Very mechanical, but once you've got it set up, and that's the problem, remembering to set it up right, it should be nice and simple. There we are, take out our piece, mount, perfect. The inner mount's done. That's this area here, the 1/4 inch inner. Now we need to cut the outer mount at 3 3/4 to leave that 1/4 inch showing inside. So we need to reset the machine. Earlier on I was talking about fancier mounts, and you can see here we've cut a 1/2 inch inner, and we've cut a 1/4 inch second mount inside that. So this requires a whole series of cuts being done. This one, but also cutting again at both ways, turning the card both ways to recut another 1/4 inch inside. It takes some working out, far more complicated, but does give a very effective mount. As in here where we've got 2 1/4 inch mounts. Set this main guard at 3 3/4 now instead of 4 inches. So undo the 2 bolts, slide it forward until we're just onto 3 3/4. For the outer mount, tighten up, make sure it's level. Now change setting on this one. To 3 3/4 here. And 3 3/4 on this one as well. Just a fraction over, so we get a slight overcut, otherwise we've got problems. Right, that should be ready to go. I'll put a new piece of card on here. I think this one's getting a little bit warm now. We do want a nice clean cut, that's vital. There's that piece. Now the card upside down, that's the darker side. Making sure that the piece of waste card remains underneath, get it right into the corner. Do a double check on our first cut, make sure everything's correct, so 3 3/4 correct, 3 3/4 correct there, and 3 3/4 here, yes, all seems to be okay, so let's do that. Place it on there, press in, slide along, release, turn the card around. Press, slide, piece will now just fall out. There we go. Now let's see what we've got, because that's one of our light coloured mounts, and we want a light colour to go with that. If this is correct, then we should now have a perfect 1/4 inch border inside there, which we have. There we go. And we need to glue those together, and voila, you have your mount. All our mounts ready to glue together now. Right, gluing up, not rocket science. Nice thick PVA glue. You spread that on the darker mount. Plenty of it. Don't go too close to the edges though, because otherwise it will squidge out. Don't want that happening. All the way along. You can either do it just straight, you can do it wavy if you want to get a slightly broader edge. There we go. Easy as that. And your lighter mount on top. And just level it up, making sure you've got all the edges tight and equal. And once you've got them level, then very carefully press down. Now what we could do when this is dry is it's standard practice to have a larger base at the bottom slightly and slightly narrower top and sides. So you could then use the trimming tool, the vertical 90-degree cutter, to cut off 1/4 inch from the sides and just leave a 1/4 inch extra on the bottom. Personally, I don't bother with that these days. I have a standard equal mount all the way around, which means that I can keep these for landscape or portrait style paintings. And with these two different coloured mounts, I find I can do nearly everything I need to do. So there we are. Let me just now show you some computerised examples of how mounts can affect the paintings, and so how carefully you should choose the colours. As our finished mounts. Here I'm going to show you two different paintings, a pastel done in the Hebrides and a French watercolour done in the market. And you will notice here how I've used different coloured mounts both on the outside and inner edge, and the difference being as to how the colours will affect the colours within. So how an inner border, even changed a small degree in warmer or cooler, will completely change the mood and will bring out and enhance the colours within the painting. So you have to choose colours that will suit the mood and atmosphere that you want from that painting, and will draw out those colours or enhance them. It should be subtle, it shouldn't be like a sore thumb. A frame should enhance, but it shouldn't stand out and be the work of art in itself. Both framing and mounting, of course, are very personal choice, as are the colours in your paintings. But it is why I like to be able to tint my own framing, as we'll look at next. I'll show you ways of making your own frames and hand tinting them, again to suit the colours of the mount, to suit the colours of the actual painting, and give you the mood that you, the artist, wanted when you originally painted it. These colours aren't, of course, ones that I might actually use, but they're just there to give you an idea of how those colours affect the actual painting, how greatly they affect the mood and draw out those colours within the painting. Earlier on we were talking about making our own frames and tinting. You can see I've now put a couple of these paintings in that we've done during this film, two of these homemade frames. Quite cheap ones that I've purchased, either been made up from offcuts of moulding or even a cheap photographic one here. Now this one's flat. These ones are easy to colour wash because you can drop the colours into the actual bands of the moulding. This one being flat's a little different. What I want to do with that one is take a bit of sea sponge and get some of the texture off that and just come in and texture across it with the dark to get the darks back again on this, and also it'll play against the texture of the painting. And to overdo it, so be careful. Be careful that you also angle the sponge at different degrees so that it doesn't all look the same. So I've already given a colour wash over this. Now I'm going back with the sponge and putting in a bit more texture across the whole thing. We'll gradually build that up until we're happy with it. We shall actually be using this same piece of sponge later to do some watercolour painting with. Just a little pink all the way around as well, just to lift it a bit, give it that snowy texture too, a slightly frosty texture. Around here, a bit of white into that. Look how effective that can be to lift out the colours that are in the painting and make it very much more about the painting itself, you see. That's rather pretty, isn't it? So you can see how that's done. There's our sponge and the texturing just going on around the edges, just to lift that up a bit and make it work with the painting itself. Now the colour washes on the rest of the paintings. This one I'd like a bit more pink in as well. Might have been quite nice to have a bit of texture like that, but I don't think I will. I want a bit of pink around this edge here. So again, put the white into the palette, a little touch of the rose. Not too much, a bit much there, so I'll whiten that down a bit more. A little touch of the yellow, just to put a slight orangey cream, more white. There we go. Now plenty of water, because we want this to go on as a thin glaze so we can wipe it down with a sponge if we need to. And then around this edge, and already that's softening that right down because it was far too stark before. I thought the dark would be alright, but it wasn't. Go right the way around here. So in this video you get not only to learn how to paint them, but how to sort your framing out as well. Mounts and frames, it's very careful to choose the right colours to match the picture you've got. Now clean water on my brush, and come back in to blend those together. So now we take the clean water and we soften that all the way around there and blend it across right down. So don't worry about touching the glass, you can wipe it off afterwards. Then that softens that one right back in. I'm going to bring that water all the way across the frame, right the way down across these colours I've already got, to blend that in. And that suits that painting a lot better. Now this one, I'd like more cream in the centre because I've got that lovely cream coming from behind. The moment's a little bit too dark, so we take our white again and a little touch of the yellow. Plenty of water. More white, a bit too dark. And we take our wash just the same, exactly the same thing around the inner edge, plenty of water. And look how that lightens it up, it was far too stark before. So all the way down to that inner edge, all the way around there. And now the clean water job again. Brush off. It's blending time.
Gravity will do some of the work because it will let these paints drop into the recesses of the moulding all the way around, glazing over the other colours. There we are, quite effective. And if you want to, you can go back into here and you take a sponge and take off some of this light if you wanted to on the inside edge, but I don't. I think that's okay. But there we are. You can see the difference in those. Now each of the frames is now painted to suit the pictures themselves. I have 3 totally different frames, each one to suit the painting that it's made for, and the colours to match, just like you would with a mount.